everyone, and welcome back to the Nerdy Multiverse and yet another breakdown. Today, we will be breaking down and giving our initial thoughts on episode 6 of the third season of House of the Dragon. Of course, House of the Dragon being a prequel series to Game of Thrones that takes place during the era known as the Dance of the Dragons from the book Fire and Blood. This breakdown and all of the other ones as well will contain spoilers from the source material. So this is your spoiler warning now, you have been warned. The title for episode 6 of the third season being Faceless Men. Now, before we get started with the actual episode, there are two sides to this war, Team Green and Team Black. If you wish to choose your side and represent them until the very end, feel free to check out our merch that was made just for you to pick your side in this unforgettable conflict. And remember to use code DRAGON for 25% off your order. Anyways though, this episode begins with Criston Cole after giving his final speech in the previous episode. Him and what remains of his forces continue to march on. He is then informed by one of his men that they have discovered one of the Rivermen's camps just up ahead, except something is strange about it. So they venture to it. And once they arrive, they discover that the camp is torn apart and covered with bodies of rivermen. But who has killed them is unknown and nowhere to be found. As soon as they start to figure out what is truly happening here, and that these rivermen did not die here, but were in fact placed here, they are ambushed out of nowhere as men posing as the dead rivermen rise from the ground and begin attacking Cole and his forces. We do get a short but sweet moment where we do get to see Cole's skills in combat put on display. Now, within the short battle here, we can see a plethora of different houses fighting each other, such as House Mallister, House Cole, House Tully, and a few others. They do manage to fight them off as they scream the Hightower's house words, "We light the way." But then they are completely surrounded by the real threat. Thousands upon thousands of rivermen joined by the Winter Wolves. Oscar Tully and Roderick Dustin are leading these forces, and they call out to Criston, telling him to walk forward so that he may learn his fate. Cole tries to get them to spare his men and only take him on, suggesting that the two of them take on just him, and then it will be a fair fight. But clearly, they are not interested in a duel and not interested in sparing any of their enemies. So as Cole prepares for one last stand, he wraps the handkerchief that Alicent gave to him around the hilt of his blade. But before he can even get the chance to get the warrior's death that he dreamt of all his life, he is shot and killed by 3 arrows, just like that. And after he falls, the rivermen and the Winter Wolves close in and eliminate the rest of his forces. After Cole falls to his death, it is shown that the one that fired the arrows was none other than Black Aly. Her real name being Alicent Blackwood, of House Blackwood of course. She is the aunt to Benjicott Blackwood, aka Bloody Ben from the books. We haven't really seen much of her herself in the show so far, but Black Aly in the books has always been recognized for her fierceness and fearlessness, but also her skill in archery, as her description in the book reads as follows: a lean, tall creature, thin as a whip and flat-chested as a boy, but long of leg and strong of arm, with a mane of thick black curls that tumbled down past her waist when loosed. A huntress, a horsebreaker, and archer without peer. Later on in Fire and Blood, she also ends up becoming the wife to Cregan Stark. Now, regarding this battle being Butcher's Ball and Criston Cole's death, they are both quite different in the books. First off, Butcher's Ball itself in the show is a much smaller scale. In the books, it is Cole and less than 4,000 men. against over 6,000 mixed forces. Oscar Tully was also not among the forces at the battle in the books. As for Criston's death, he does get shot by arrows in the book, however, it is not Black Aly who kills him. It is actually Red Rob Rivers among 2 other unknown longbowmen, who fired on him by the order of Sir Pate of Longleaf. A few of the extremely iconic lines that made this battle and Cole's death one of my favorite moments from the books were also unfortunately completely cut out of the show. In the books, Criston approaches the 3 commanders Roderick Dustin, Garibald Grey, and Pate of Longleaf, seeking the safety of his men's lives if he strikes their banners. He proposes a duel between the 4 of them, saying, "As you will it. We can begin here, the 4 of us, 1 of me against the 3 of you. Will that be enough to make a fight of it?" And Sir Pate of Longleaf would respond with the words that likely haunted Cole in his very last moments, saying, "I'll want 3 more. I'll have no songs of how brave you died, Kingmaker. There's tens of thousands dead on your account." Following these words from Pate, Cole would then be shot and killed by the 3 archers. What followed Cole's death is quite reminiscent of what happens in the show, however. With Criston dead, Roderick Dustin would sound the charge of the vanguard, and hundreds of Cole's forces would be killed while trying to flee. In the aftermath, Garibald Grey would remark that today was butchery, not battle. And after hearing these stories, Mushroom would title the battle Butcher's Ball. I will also add that the line that Oscar says in this episode, being, "I made a promise to the dead Cole. I told them I'd build a sept out of traitors' bones. I don't have near enough bones yet," is a line straight from the book. However, it is a line that is said by Sir Garibald. With Cole dead and Butcher's Ball over, just like that, we then cut to King's Landing, as Alicent and Helena are discovered in the tunnel that they tried to escape out of, but were ultimately trapped in the previous episode. We then head to Rhaenyra and her small council as they meet and discuss the gold cloak deaths that keep counting up once more, as Rhaenyra is eagerly awaiting her army of rivermen who are still reported to be having issues with Criston and his forces. This is something that is common throughout the entire episode, as nobody has learned that Criston Cole has died. Daemon, as usual, does not think that they should wait any longer for their armies and volunteers to go to Tumbleton himself and burn their enemies out. As he says, they should have done that from the very beginning. He tries to use Aegon the Conqueror as an example, as he burnt thousands of people during his conquest. However, as Rhaenyra says, he burnt enemy soldiers, not innocent civilians, that again view her as the queen. Burning them would in turn fully turn the small folk against her, which is something that is already brewing inside of her own city. Daemon uses the Conqueror as an example, while Rhaenyra looks to her father Viserys as her example, and this is what causes even more conflict between these two. This council is a complete mess, and it's made quite obvious every single time that Torrhen Manderly or Sabbatha Frey speak. Daemon ends up throwing cups at them in this episode, which is kind of funny because he used to wonder why his brother never had him sitting at his council. Now we see exactly why. But in the long run, these two are actually right, and even Alan agrees with them, that they should be more patient and just wait a few more days for the Rivermen and the Winter Wolves joint army to arrive at Tumbleton. And instead of sending dragons while they wait for their armies, Rhaenyra instead says that she will send knives, aka assassins. Daemon decides to go and deal with the gold cloak issue himself, or at least try to find out more about what's going on and who is responsible, as Rhaenyra petitions for more Valyrian forces to be brought to the city, as they may be needed to secure it because of the gold cloaks falling apart. After the council meeting, Rhaenyra meets with men from House Baratheon. It is clear that the Baratheons are a bit swayed to Rhaenyra's side right now, or at least considering it, albeit they will likely stick with Team Green in the long run, as they did in the books. And as we know, Boris Baratheon has already sworn for Aegon. Rhaenyra wanted to meet with Boris himself, but she is informed that he has rode south to the Red Mountains to deal with the Vulture King. The Vulture King is a title that a few people have claimed throughout the history of Westeros, and it's a title that outlaws that rise against the Iron Throne often gain. The first Vulture King rose to power during the reign of Aemond Targaryen, and a second would rise during the rule of Jacaerys Targaryen. The one that we hear about in this episode is the third known Vulture King. Rhaenyra does bring up the fact that it was Borys's job to see that her son Lucerys was kept safe well under his roof, recalling the fact that Lucerys was chased out of and later killed just outside of Storm's End by Aemond and his dragon. She says for that, she could kill these men here in his place, but instead she has them give her their uniforms. And this is what all leads into the entire assassination plot. We then cut to the outskirts of Tumbleton as we see Vermithor fly overhead and then land next to Silverwing. We can see the two dragons bonding here, and I really liked this detail, as the two were considered mates and said to be as closely bonded as their former riders, King Jaehaerys and Queen Alicent. Hugh and Ulf then meet as Hugh has come to take over the watch over Tumbleton. Ulf has nothing to report here, but he does recall their days as small folk in King's Landing. We get yet another hint at Ulf's allegiance sort of swaying as he says that their lives have not really changed, and now all they do is listen to the commands of the queen, as well as lose the simple things from their past, such as going to the tavern with their friends. But of course, he says he would never go back to being poor. So it's clear that he wants more and seeks even more glory, while also not being held back. We also know that he is constantly disrespected by the others in Team Black, such as Daemon. With Hugh now taking over the watch, he will take over for the next 2 days, and then Ulf will return. Book readers, I think we all know what will happen in 2 days or beforehand. It won't be them taking over each other's watch, but it will be the buildup of their allegiances swaying, and we will end up seeing that all take place during both of the Battle of Tumbletons. We then cut back to King's Landing as Alicent and Rhaenyra meet. Rhaenyra is furious that Alicent tried escaping, and this is when she is told of Helena's pregnancy. In order to keep them from escaping, Rhaenyra has their guard doubled, and Alicent gets upset with this and suggests letting her and Helena just leave and go somewhere far away where Rhaenyra will never hear of them again. Which is kind of crazy for her to even ask for, because Rhaenyra has been very kind to them given the fact that they are prisoners and in fact are on the enemy's side. She also makes sure that their confinement is even more strict to hide the fact that Helena is pregnant, because if people see that and learn that Aegon possibly has another male heir, they could turn on Rhaenyra. This leads into Rhaenyra telling Mysaria of Helena's pregnancy, which we know she actually already knew of. and chose to not tell Rhaenyra about. So in order to cover her tracks and take away one of the only people who helped Alicent out, she has the maid killed. We then see Daemon as he revisits the site of Sir Luthor's death. He is met by a band of gold cloaks who have come to resign. They can't risk their lives while not receiving any payment for it, so they must leave and look after their families instead. Daemon tries to use his usual speeches to change their minds one last time, but this time it just doesn't work out. Again, this is yet another display showing that the people are slowly turning against and giving up on Rhaenyra. Then cutting to Alan as he meets with his father Corlys as he cleans up the aftermath of his hunt of the Triarchy remnants somewhere along the coast. Alan is here seeking his father's help once more, as Rhaenyra and King's Landing itself need his help. But once again, Corlys refuses, and it's all because Rhaenyra has not legitimized Alan or Adam. This is where Alan responds and says, "And how many years did it take you to do the same?" Which is honestly the cold hard truth. Corlys ignored his sons for years upon years, and just recently decided to acknowledge them as his own, and then decided to get upset with Rhaenyra because she couldn't legitimize them right when he requested it. As Alan leaves, Corlys informs him that Tywin Lannister survived the Gullet and is heading to Rook's Rest, and to tell Rhaenyra and her council about this news. However, as we know, Tywin has obviously already arrived there and reunited with Aegon and Larys, and that is exactly where we cut to next, as we see them burying the man that Aegon had to kill in the last episode to hide his true identity. It's a sort of comedic scene as they also discuss their venture to Braavos. Aegon then tries to get Tywin to tell him if he also thinks he's a terrible man. The same exact thing that Larys called him in the last episode, of course. Tywin has trouble answering the question directly, but you can definitely tell that he thinks it. He just doesn't want to say it. I mean, I think we can all remember the piggyback ride that he was forced to give Aegon's son, Jacaerys, and he might still be salty about that. They decide that they will sail to Essos after lying low in Rook's Rest for a few days. However, their venture to Essos will likely not happen. As I have mentioned before, I do believe that we will be seeing a legendary moment where Sunfire rises from the dead and returns to Aegon. I think that after hearing of Tywin's survival, Rhaenyra will send men to Rook's Rest to capture him, where they also will discover Larys and Aegon. Aegon will likely snap on these men, and it will end up looking pretty bad for him and his two advisors here, which is when I think Sunfire will show up and save the day. We then cut to the Vale as Rhaena is still in hiding. She ends up hearing and then seeing two dragons off in the distance. This is Baela and Adam on their dragons Moondancer and Seasmoke. And this leads into her returning to the Eyrie as we see them using the iconic moon door on someone. Rhaena is brought in to meet Jane Arryn, who absolutely scolds her. She does not care if Rhaena heard her sister's dragon or not, and wanted to see her for herself, as she is being hunted by them and Rhaenyra, and if they learned of Jane Arryn harboring Rhaena, she too would be in serious trouble. So she sends her on her way one final time and says that if she tests her again, it will be the last time that she does it. I have mentioned it before in a previous breakdown, but these two's relationship is vastly different in the books. They aren't as important or have many lines for that matter, but Rhaena is often described as Jane's spoiled ward, and the people of the Vale do love her, so much that they sang songs of her. All of this change between these two and with Rhaenyra in general is likely because the character was mixed with the book character known as Nettles. We then cut to Harrenhal as Alicent once again comforts Aemond and tends to his wounds, thanking him for saving her life from the assassins in the previous episode. Their relationship is clearly building up, but Aemond wishes to leave to find his dragon. But Alicent wishes for him to stay, as she does say, "When you find your mount, will you then fly to your death?" Not only is this her referencing the fact that Aemond is vastly outnumbered, as Rhaenyra has 6 dragons at her disposal, but I can also see it as a slight foreshadowing to the battle above the God's Eye. We then cut to Alan meeting with Baela, somewhere inside of the dragon pit. Baela is exhausted from all of her traveling and scouting that she has been doing with Adam. We know from the last episode that the two had been doing it pretty much non-stop, and she hasn't really eaten much either. Alan tries to get Baela to go out again, but this time to go and speak with Corlys, so that maybe she can get him to return to King's Landing and back into Rhaenyra's service as her hand. The pair end up discussing a bit more, and it does lead into them kissing. I have mentioned their relationship a few times in my other breakdowns, but them getting together is something that happens in the books, albeit it was not exactly out of pure love, and was more to secure the future of their houses. They are also around the same age in the books, whereas in the show for some reason, there is a pretty big age gap. However, I do think that it is a bit crazy that we never got to see any sort of development of Baela and Jacaerys' relationship before all of this. But it is what it is. We then cut to Tumbleton as Gwaine Hightower has arrived and is meeting with Ormond and Darren. Gwaine informs Ormond of everything that he has been through lately and of him and Cole's mission through the Riverlands. Throughout their entire conversation, Ormond is using his sniff ball, again displaying his strong sensitivity to odors. He also seems to not get along with Gwaine very well and does make a few remarks about Gwaine possibly being gay. Ormond eventually sends him away and Darren follows him out. We get a pretty nice scene where Darren finally gets the chance to freely express himself, and he truly does fear Ormond and hates what he becomes when he is around him. He clearly holds a bit of sentiment towards Gwaine, who left him alone with Ormond in Old Town, as he clearly looks up to Gwaine rather than Ormond, who clearly uses Darren as a sort of puppet in his own game. We then cut to Alicent and Helaena, as we hear that Helaena is now refusing to eat. This is likely because she has now been separated from her daughter Jacaerys, after Alicent lied to her. During their conversation, Helaena is cross-stitching something and ends up using the needles to try and hurt herself. This is somewhat reminiscent of how Alicent used to pick at her nails when nervous, but also, unfortunately, is just yet another hint to where this character is heading. We then end up seeing what Helaena was stitching, and it appears to be that of Aemond at Harrenhal, as we can see the glow of his sapphire eye in the design. The design also shows that he is with a figure of a woman who stands above him. This is likely symbolizing that of Alice Rivers. And speaking of Aemond, that is where we head to next, as he is preparing to leave Harrenhal on horseback. However, before he can do so, he is caught and spotted by a stable boy, who Alice ends up killing to protect Aemond here, so that Aemond's presence is kept a secret. This convinces Aemond to stay a bit longer, And that is when Alice shows him a crate of 5 dragon eggs. It is said that these eggs come from Dreamfire and were laid when Rhaenyra Targaryen stayed in these very halls before her death. Rhaenyra Targaryen was one of Maegor the Cruel's Black Brides, and was the first rider of Dreamfire, the dragon that Helaena now owns. Rhaenyra ended up staying in Harrenhal after her daughter's death, and that is where Dreamfire laid these eggs. Of course, we have also seen 4 other eggs in the previous season that were sent away to Pentos by Rhaenyra with her other sons. So I'm not sure which batch of eggs contains that of Daenerys' eggs. Although I will say it is more likely that the ones that Rhaenyra was in possession of had Daenerys' future eggs among them. Alice also uses these unhatched eggs to suggest a relationship with Aemond, saying that she will be the Lady of Water while he will become the Dragon Lord, as these 5 eggs hatching would bring forth a new age of power, and they would be unstoppable. It is also said that Aemond's sons will be Dragon Lords and princes themselves, and then these two end up kissing. As I have said before, they do have a relationship in the source material, and Alice does end up getting pregnant there as well. We then cut to Rhaenyra as she sits the Iron Throne, listening to the small folks' requests once more. However, this time, she doesn't really do anything about any of their concerns or requests, and points them to other people, such as Torrhen Manderly. She also ends up cutting her finger on the throne here, which she quickly hides as she looks up at the statue of her father Viserys. But in the books, when she cuts her arms on the throne, these small folk were said to view it as a sign that she was unfit to rule. As it said, drops of blood fell to the floor as she went past, and wise men looked at one another, though none dared speak the truth out loud. The Iron Throne had spurned her, and her days upon it would be few. But then again, we do also have to remember that this passage is written from Eustace Osgrey's point of view, and he wasn't exactly the biggest fan of Rhaenyra. We've also heard Robert Baratheon recite this very incident, where he said that this theory was nonsense. The exact quote reads as follows: "Nonsense. It's a chair made of steel blades. Rhaenyra had wanted it all her life and sacrificed 2 sons for it. She likely gripped the damned thing too tight." Regardless though, it is clear that she does not see it as a good sign here, and immediately upon seeing it and hiding it, she gets up and walks out of the throne room. As she does so, we get this really cool shot overhead of her standing by the throne as these swords surround her in a shape that sort of seems like wings. Now in the streets of King's Landing, we see Daemon now rocking a gold cloak outfit. However, he is in disguise here so that he can figure out what is truly going on. He ends up being tailed by the same man that we saw in the last episode, and the one who was working as a Hightower soldier earlier in the season. But he ends up catching this guy, and questioning him doesn't really go anywhere, as the guy just tells Daemon what he already really knows. They are doing this for Daeron, who they now see as their king. However, he does refer to Daeron as Daeron the Daring here, which is the exact title that he had in the source material. He gained this title because of his role in the war in the Reach, as him and his dragon Tessarion were responsible for many of the Hightower host's victories. The man here says that it does not matter how many of them he kills. They are the people of the 7 kingdoms, and the more of them that die, the more of them will end up joining their cause. Daemon has enough of it and just ends up killing the guy instead of taking him in for more questioning. And on Daemon's way back out, he ends up running into Ulf, who initially yells at him before realizing that it is actually Daemon. Before he can get scolded any further, Ulf does actually end up standing up for himself here, as he has been denied something as simple as visiting a tavern with his friends, and says that men should be able to enjoy their pleasures, and that Daemon would know a lot about that himself, recalling the fact that Daemon was seen visiting the brothels quite often. This causes Daemon to punch him to the ground. Not only will this give the Gold Cloaks and therefore Rhaenyra a bad look, but this will continue to push Ulf's allegiances away from Rhaenyra for the constant mistreatment that he is facing. And I do believe that one of the people witnessing this is the same girl who was acting as a spy for the Hightower loyalists that we saw in the last episode. We then cut back to Hugh Hammer, who takes matters into his own hands as he ends up knocking out and taking on the disguise of one of Tumbleton's people. He sneaks into the town to find and meet with his wife, Kat. And as he makes his way inside, we can also see a few Baratheon soldiers enter the town as well. They reunite and have a quick emotional moment together, which is then when Hugh proudly tells her that he is now a knight and a dragon rider. She ends up not accepting this and not recognizing who he is anymore, and she ends up leaving him. This whole situation will also likely lead into him possibly finding a reason to blame this on Rhaenyra, and his allegiances swaying as well. During this entire interaction though, inside the main hall, Ormond, Gwaine, and Daeron meet once more. Ormond does give his props to Rhaenyra for once, as he respects the decision to choose Corlys as her hand. He then sort of makes fun of Otto Hightower. The Baratheon soldiers then arrive, saying that they are there on behalf of Boris Baratheon to swear fealty to the new king, Daemon Targaryen. Something is clearly wrong here though, and Gwaine catches onto it pretty much right away. These Baratheon soldiers are actually the assassins in disguise that were sent by Rhaenyra to take care of Daeron and Ormond. After Gwaine discovers this, they take the assassins out after a small battle. Now, during this small battle, we do get to see Jon Roxton in action, using his Valyrian steel blade known as Orphan Maker, where we see him cut the lower half of a man in half. This is pretty much what he ends up doing to someone else that I will not name later on in the story. And it serves as one of the most brutal, but also somehow one of the funniest deaths in the dance. After the battle, Ormond's sensitivity is once again shown, and it makes me really think that Rhaenyra will somehow weaponize it, as he ends up puking after everything. Later on, while Daeron goes back to training below, Ormond and Gwaine meet with one another, where Ormond does end up apologizing for being too harsh earlier. Gwaine confronts him on Ormond's true plan here, and says that he has a way of sacrificing others' lives, but never putting himself in harm's way. This could be hinting at the fact that Ormond is truly planning on sacrificing Daeron for his own plan. We then cut back to King's Landing as Alicent and Rhaenyra meet once more, as Alicent tells Rhaenyra about Helena's dreaming ability. Rhaenyra refers to her as a dreamer, which is something that several other Targaryens have been referred to in the past, or the future, such as Aegon the Conqueror, Daemon III, and Daenys Targaryen, who Rhaenyra also mentions here. Daenys foresaw the doom of Valyria in her dreams, and this caused her father, Aegon Targaryen, to sell their holdings in Valyria, moving him and his family to Dragonstone. And because of her dreams, House Targaryen was the only family of dragon riders from Valyria to survive the doom. Rhaenyra hears of Aemond's whereabouts that Alicent knows of because of Helena's dreams, and she comes up with a plan to not send the usual assassins that Aemond will either kill or hide from, but to send someone that he has trust in, pointing towards Alicent herself, his very own mother. This entire plot is entirely original to the show, and leads to her leaving King's Landing and heading towards Harrenhal towards the very end of the episode. Before she leaves, however, she does see Helena one last time, as she finally gets her to eat some soup. And I have seen this pointed out a few times on the internet, but this soup could very possibly have been mixed with moon tea, which would then stop Helena's pregnancy without her knowing. And this could be why she looks kind of sick in the next episode. We will have to wait to see if this theory comes true or not though. As Alicent talks to her here, however, she holds a figure of a horse over the edge of her seat. I think that this is once again foreshadowing to where Helena will end up herself. Over the edge. After Rhaenyra visits her son, Joffrey's room, while he is once again asleep, she still evidently has not spent any time with him. Rhaenyra is then brought a message from Tumbleton, and it happens to be one of the Baratheon uniforms covered in words that are written with blood. The message reads, "Kick this dog and it will bite your hand." Not only is this message saying that Ormond and his side will retaliate for the assassination attempt, but it quite literally means that they will target her hand. As we return to Corlys, during the darkness of night, he gives a speech to his men about their victories over the Triarchy and their remnants. But once he is off alone in the woods, he is met by Jon Roxton and choked unconscious, likely to be used as a tool to get Rhaenyra to attack Tumbleton faster. As Roxton has Corlys taken away, he also sends men into his camp, and this is where the episode ends off. Overall, this was another episode that focused mostly on developing things. Although we did get some action, that is one part that I will say I do think felt a bit underwhelming, as I wish there was a bit more with Butcher's Ball and its execution. I do think that when it comes to big events such as that, they tend to happen really fast, all while other plot points that are show originals seem to be sort of dragging on. It was still a good watch though, and it had the usual great performances, scores, action, and visuals, but I did have a few issues with some of the changes from the source material in this one, especially regarding Butcher's Ball. But other than that, it was okay. If I had to rate the episode, I think I would give it around a 7 out of 10. But yeah, that about does it for this episode, from me at least. But of course, I would like to hear your thoughts on the episode as well, so make sure to leave them down below. And with that being said, thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed our breakdown and review on this episode, don't forget to give it a like. And with that, we will see you all the next time that we go through and explore the Nerdy Multiverse.